Emerge Stories is a place where, as the name implies, you are going to hear stories. Stories from people all over the Philippines who have come from many different types of backgrounds, and especially people who have gone through struggles, people who have gone through the challenging parts of life. And I hope that these stories will relate for you in some way, that some of these stories will really land for you because these people have gone through probably just about the same thing you might be going through right now. In today's Emerge story, I am joined by Nizley Alferez. She is now in Canada, but is from Cebu. And that's where I met her probably 5 or 6 years ago. And we met in a Toastmasters club, which is a place where you can practice your communication in a group of people where you can get good feedback and you really lift your confidence. And that's something I've watched Niz do over the last number of years, is really become such a confident communicator and someone who really influences and inspires other people. She's now the host of a show on YouTube called Filipinos in Canada, where she shares stories of Filipino immigrants and their experiences in Canada. She's also launched several digital products and events that focus on personal development and empowerment. In this conversation, you're going to hear some of her journey and some of the things that she's gone through in having to sort of reprogram herself or unpack some of the programming that was already in her through culture and things that she learned through her family, et cetera, that she really chose to kind of rewire so that she can see the world a little differently and so that she can really become a better, more powerful, more inspirational version of herself. And I think you guys are going to be pretty inspired by getting to know Niz. I know she's somebody who I really am amazed by, who I look at and say, wow, I hope I can really create content like she does in the future. So hope you guys enjoy this conversation. I hope there's something in this that inspires you and that you can take and use in your life and in your personal growth journey. If you find anything here that's inspiring or useful, if this has been somehow valuable to you, just take a minute and share it with someone else that you think would also benefit from it. Thanks so much for being here, and let's listen to the conversation with Niz. Welcome, Nizley, to the Emerge Philippines interview series. Thank you so much for taking time to be here. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks.
And you're joining us from?
I'm from Canada. Right
Awesome.
now, I'm in Canada. Yeah.
You're not from Canada, you're from here.
That's correct. Yeah.
So we've swapped time zones. I grew up in the
Yeah.
East Coast time zone, and now I'm here and you're there. So,
Yeah. So that's correct. I'm from the Philippines, but currently in Canada.
well, tell us a little bit about like what is your life like now? Like, what are you doing? How did you end up in Canada?
Well, I recently graduated from a business marketing course. It's a 2-year course at Seneca College. And so, yeah, I'm currently working as an administrative manager for a US company, but I'm currently based here in Canada and doing all remote work. I am managing a remote team. And basically, it is an industry called Community Association Management, where we handle inquiries about community associations and all the management stuff around it. So I've been working for the company for 2 years now. And the
Oh,
reason why I'm here in Canada is because I finished that, business marketing course.
very cool.
Thank you.
That was actually an industry I was connected to in the US back a long time ago
Mhm.
in an old life.
Hmm.
So I've known you for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something like that. We met in
Yeah.
Toastmasters
Yeah.
in public speaking club here in Cebu. And I've seen you kind of grow yourself quite a bit in the years that I've known you. And I'm looking forward to people kind of hearing your story about that. But like before we jump back to your youth and your
Hmm.
origin story,
Hmm.
what would you say what are some things about you yourself and your life right now that you're proud of or that where you feel like you've kind of created a life or crafted yourself into someone? Like tell us, just paint a picture of, obviously your life isn't perfect and you're still learning lots of things.
Yeah.
And I know you're
Correct.
you're like a lifelong learner, but like what are some things where you feel like you've gotten your life, wow, I'm really pretty proud of these things about me and my life.
Well, what I'm really most proud to say being in this situation right now in Canada, being in Canada is really such an abundant place. And I'm also coming from that place too. In the past, I've had experiences of scarcity, which I'll be discussing in a bit. But right now, I feel so proud that this is also the most abundant life I've ever experienced. In the Philippines, we've encountered a lot of difficulties. And now I realize that, moving yourself out from situations could potentially change or trigger some changes in your life. And now I feel like I am so proud of living an abundant life, not only financially, but also in that Canada itself is such an abundant place. And I would like to attribute a lot of that through the continuous learning that I've had, the continuous studying and education. Even though I finished college and the 2 year course, every single day, I'm so proud of being able to connect with myself on a deeper level through meditations and etc. And being able to also connect with mentors like you yourself. You've been a mentor to me in the past several years and you know your influence. And I feel like that level of connection that I've created for myself and with the kind of network that I have, aside from being abundant, those are the things that I'm truly proud of.
Nice. I am looking forward to hearing you talk more about being abundant.
Yeah.
How about we jump back to kind of where did you start life?
Yeah. Well, as a family, we started with a middle class income. My father had a decent job. We had a really very comfortable life as a family until my parents decided to invest in a construction business. After 2 years of being in this construction business, it went bankrupt because of wrong partnerships. And that was the reason why all our life as a family came down to whatever it was. It was full of scarcity. It was full of insecurity. And I felt like my family or my parents really had to jump from one job to another to try to make ends meet. It was not a very good situation as a family because we had to move from one place to another, trying to find like a cheaper rent or trying to find a work that would at least put food on the table. And going up to that situation really exposed me to events like not having birthday parties, like situations where I would feel insecure because I didn't have anything to wear to a Sunday school. And I was a legit Christian child. So my parents grew up in a Christian family and that environment. So basically, I started off with nothing. I started with a very low income family. We had to move from one place to another. We had to juggle around and make sure that we have money because it was almost always scarce. So this has been my situation until I went into high school. I had to work some part-time jobs, and even until college, I had to land a scholarship program that I had to maintain a 1.5 GPA. That is like almost 4.0 GPA here in Canada. And that was really tough considering that I also had some part-time jobs during those times. So yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you for sharing a very condensed story of kind of your upbringing. I want to ask you from your perspective. You said that your dad had a pretty good job before investing
Yeah.
into the construction company and then losing everything.
Mhm.
But then after that, you felt like your family, at least looking back now, the way you're seeing it is that your family went into a very scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. I'm not sure if I'm getting it
Yeah.
right, but
Correct. Yeah.
what would have prevented, I'm not sure this is the right question, but what would have prevented your dad from going back and getting another pretty good job? Or do you think it was the way they responded to the thing that happened that made them even worse because of being in that, you know, I don't know, victim mindset
Yeah.
or like the world's not like, what do you think? What do you see? I saw looking back a lot of mistakes my parents made, a lot of great things they did too, a lot of things they taught me, but I saw some mistakes they made. I'm curious to hear, what do you think there's any lesson there in sort of the way your parents responded to that bad event?
I think might be two things. First is their lack of education. I think both my parents did not finish college and did not have the right resources to, tap into, for example, mentors, for example, books that they can get information and knowledge on how to run a business and how to find real partnerships and how to surround themselves with the right people. I think that's one reason. And the second is I think they did not have enough tools to actually handle that bankruptcy because that was like the ultimate like capital, like all the money that we had as a family was
Yeah,
all in that construction business. And they were
right.
like, they didn't have the tools, they didn't know how to handle their emotions properly. And I would say it would still go back to reason number one, which is the lack of education. Because if they had been surrounded with the right people and had the right resources, they would have handle it differently and they would have like perhaps ventured into another business or found some partnerships that were integral to making another huge success or whatever. So that might probably be two reasons that I could think of. And I feel like from those lessons, I now took a lot of value in education because that is really where the failure, quote unquote, that my parents had in the past that I would not want to reciprocate or would I not want to replicate in my life.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that.
So having a really bad event like that happening, I guess,
Mhm.
I was thinking, well, your dad, where did they get the money to invest in the first place? Must have been from his job before,
From
right?
his
Is that fair?
previous job. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And let's not dig too much deeper into it because of time's
Yeah.
sake. But, there's just the patterns I've seen in the way things happen with people sometimes is that instead of, it sounds like you're saying that maybe they didn't have you went down to the reasons of why they might not have responded to that as well
Yeah.
as they could have, which is that they didn't really know how to manage their emotions, which means
Correct.
that whatever the narrative in their minds was about that event, it crashed them instead of them trying again. It's like instead of
Correct.
going and build up you could still try again. You don't have to let it crash you, but it kind of
Yeah.
crashed them. So
Yeah.
are those fair enough assumptions without going deeper on that?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So the part I really want to kind of shine a light on is because you used the word education several times that you feel like they
Yeah.
didn't have access to resources for learning. And I hear a contrast. Like I think you're saying that you do now, but is it just so you worked really hard to
Mm.
get the scholarship,
Yeah.
have other side gigs, et cetera, to be able to pay for your own education through the academe, path. But I also know you to be somebody who puts a lot of energy into learning on your own, like reading
Yeah.
books, listening to podcasts, YouTube videos, like finding your own sources. Is it fair to say that you're seeing a big contrast between like now people like that you are plugging into the newly available infinite world of information that your parents sort of didn't have? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And I think it's because of the advent of technology. There are a lot of resources right now that we can plug into, like Spotify is always available with all the wonderful podcasts. And I feel like my parents in the past didn't have those access.
Exactly.
And yeah, and now it is honestly a really huge advantage for the newer generation because we can we can take leverage on these resources and apply them into our lives. And throughout my growth for the past years, that's what I was doing. I was just really leveraging on the resources available online. And I wish my parents had that.
Yeah, I totally feel the same. There was a point where I realized that if I could have wished for anything that my parents could have done differently, it would not have been anything directly for me. Wouldn't have been like, doing anything specifically directly for me, but more for themselves. Like
Yeah, correct.
I would have wished that
Yeah.
my parents would have just kept growing. And,
Yeah.
and they got to their 20s, they had a bunch of kids, they were running a business, they got so
Yeah.
busy. And I don't think they didn't have that mindset of continuing to grow themselves, which of course, where would you get that mindset? Because you're not going to learn it
Yeah.
from your parents or school. But man, I just wish my parents could have kept growing because now that I've made that decision, I can see what it is doing for my kids, that they see that example.
Right.
So I know this might be a little bit of a tough question, but just kind of for fun and only for the purpose of thinking like, wow, we're so lucky that we live in this period of time where we have access, can learn from anyone. We can virtually surround ourselves with anyone we choose because there's so many amazing people sharing what they know and what they've learned through all the different channels that are available to us, right? Knowing what you know and knowing what you have access to, what might you do? Just kind of in a quick nutshell, what advantages do you think you would have if you were in a situation just like your parents were in? Like if you had made that mistake, you had some money saved up, you invested in a business, the partnership was poorly chosen for whatever reasons, and then and then you lose all your money. Like what advantages do you think you now have that they didn't have that would have led you? And what would you maybe do differently in kind of a similar situation? Maybe how would you see it different?
Well, I guess what I have right now is a growth mindset that probably my parents didn't have in the past. Because right now, I face every difficulty and I try to find a lesson because every time you face a difficulty, you can always find some golden nuggets there. You can always find a lesson. And according to Carol Dweck, you can change your life by just changing your mindset. And if just my parents just had those growth mindsets in the past, they're able to get some lessons out of those bad situations or difficult situations and then come up stronger, come up some with a better strategy on how to approach life. And so if I were in the shoes of my parents, I would just have a growth mindset and would learn from Carol Dweck
You learned that from Carol Dweck's
mindset book.
the book Mindset. I think that's one of the most foundational books I've ever read, and it's so
Yeah,
critical.
for me too.
When did you read it, or when did you find out about it?
2017. It's
Okay.
in 2017. Yeah.
And what changed for you? What can you remember shifting in your, like after you read it, after you got exposed to the concept of how changeable, seeing ourselves as either changeable or not changeable? Like what changed in your view of yourself or the world, or what did it do for you?
Yeah, I was always this kind of person who I branded myself or identified myself as not a techie person because I felt like it's just not for me, it's just not my thing. But after reading that book, that was the ultimate thing that changed me because I felt like as long as I dedicate myself specific hours of learning something, that I would eventually learn it. So it's like transitioning from having a fixed mindset to getting a growth mindset by studying, by learning, and by doing things consistently. And I felt like I had that fixed mindset in the past, but now
Yeah.
look at me. I'm now a bit techie. I'm no longer scared of technology as I was in the past. So that was a really good book.
Yeah, I think that book is incredible. Just for a silly and fun side
Yeah,
question, are you a good singer
I'm not.
yet?
I'm not yet. Yeah,
Yet.
that's correct. I'm not yet. Oh yeah. Yeah,
I
correct.
wasn't trying I wasn't trying to catch
Not
you on that,
yet.
but anybody who doesn't know
Yeah,
that book, go look on YouTube
correct.
for
Yeah.
something about it. And it just as an illustration, I used to think that I, at some point in my past, and I think a lot of people see skills, even I think singing is a really interesting one because it's very often that we just assume that kind of like you either have it or you don't, you're either born with it or you're not. Like you
Yeah.
have a voice or you don't. And it's just not true. It's like any of us, presuming you have a voice at all and can use it, like can
Yeah.
speak if you're not mute, then you can learn. Like you could get a voice coach or you could learn, you could watch videos, you
Correct.
could learn
Yeah.
breathing techniques. And it's actually shocking moving to the Philippines and being here 9 years. Like I had no choice but to learn how to sing. And I was really surprised. Like I got much better when I decided, oh, maybe this is learnable instead of saying I can't learn it.
Yeah, correct.
Like
Yeah,
everything is learnable. So we're
it
so
is.
changeable. All right. Awesome. So you worked really hard to get a scholarship. You graduated. What was your course?
Bachelor in elementary education.
Ah, you were going to be a teacher.
Yeah, I was a teacher by profession and I'm
I
a
see.
licensed one. Yeah.
So how you actually teach? You actually taught for a while?
I actually did not. I was just a teacher by profession and I had some few years of teaching for like internship, but I never practiced it as a profession really. So yeah.
You are not the first person. In fact, I'd say most of the people I know who studied education didn't become teachers. So what happened? Like why did you not?
Well, maybe not yet, right? From Carol Dweck's book. Actually, I have this passion for education, and I know it's going to be something that I want to explore in the future, just not now. And my course was for elementary education. I want to teach like college. I want to be a professor. It's something that I would be passionate about in the future.
Okay.
So I'm not closing my doors. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's kind of zoom out and just look at, the next number of
Mhm.
years between sort of then and now. Like what if I asked you what are some pivotal moments where you made big decisions or maybe some really big challenges that you've gone through that helped you where through those challenges you learned a lot? What are some things that come to mind?
I would start with graduating college because after I graduated college, that was the moment when things started to shift and I became a breadwinner in the family because I was working for a call center company and I actually had just a fair salary. You know that it's not really a decent job it's a decent job, but not a decent income. So way back, I did not really have a huge income, but because I was placed in that situation where I had to give, where I have to sustain the family needs and etc., I became like the only child working for the family. While my parents, they had low income job, they still actually tried working, but it still was not sufficient. So I ended up being the breadwinner and also paying for my brother's tuition fee for college because I had to help him as well. And I think that was the start of realizing that, in the Philippines, kids are expected to give back to their parents.
Yeah.
Kids are expected to, give back to the family. Your family brought you up, your family gave you financial support when you were studying. And now that you have graduated, it is now your responsibility to give back to the family. And I'm not saying it's entirely wrong. I'm just saying that I'm just starting to question it right now. I'm just starting to question it. Like, where was that coming from? Because I feel like throughout the later years of my life that it was becoming unhealthy, that I did not really spend money for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
was feeling guilty spending things for myself because I felt like I need to give first before I can even have for myself. So I think a lot of Filipinos have struggled with that. And I
Yeah.
myself have been there.
When I think I talked about this with friends as well,
Yeah.
when I first started realizing what that cultural system looked like and how it affects people with and how guilt is such a
Yeah.
strong tool in that system. And I saw it as a cultural system that I think is holding people back because you don't end up, because a lot of people in their 20s are not investing in themselves because if they do, they feel guilty.
Correct.
Like
Yeah.
if you
Correct.
wanted to
Yeah.
join Toastmasters and spend
Yeah.
2,500 pesos every 6 months just to help yourself become a better communicator, which, oh my God, would be one of the best investments you could ever make,
Correct.
not only in
Yeah.
yourself, but in who you would become by the time you're 30 and how would that actually help your family? Like, oh my God, it would help so much. But we're limiting ourselves from investing in ourselves because we feel so obligated and guilted that anything we spend on ourselves is not good. Is that fair and understanding?
Yes.
Because I didn't grow up
Absolutely
here, right?
correct.
But I like empathize because I've seen so many people feel it. So what do you think is not good about that? Or what do you think, what is good, what isn't good? What is your take on kind of that whole,
Well, I would totally agree that instead of like investing in yourself when you were in your 20s, you tend to give back to the family because you are obligated to do that. And that really stops a lot from your progress and growth. So then I started my personal growth journey like just late 20s because on the first few years I had to support my family. And I think it's really coming from that culture that we have that's called like close family ties. When you are close knit with your family, then you're close together, that you also tend to take responsibility that is not supposed to be yours. And I remember when I was in Switzerland for a year, my my bosses or my employers would say, "Oh, why are you still sending money to your parents? Or why are you not deciding things for yourself? Why are you always like talking to them when it comes to finances when you can already make this decision?" And I in my 20s, early 20s, I was not empowered to do so because we were really strongly in that culture of close family ties. And we pride ourselves of supporting our parents. We pride ourselves of being able to give back. But just towards the later years, I feel like I need to prioritize myself so I can give more. And that was the realization that, hey, I need to stop doing this. They need to take responsibility. Like they are adults, they know how to earn income and they need to find a way to make ends meet. And I would no longer have to support them.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny how we use terms like close family ties, but that's not
Yeah.
actually what we mean. It's not because really good relationship
Mhm.
between two people where you're very close, like that's a completely different thing
Yeah.
than a system of obligation that makes one feel either trapped, stuck, controlled, guilty. Like these are not, that's not. Anyway, just to point out.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, when did you first start feeling like you wanted to invest in yourself? So you said you were kind of starting this personal growth journey. What did that look like? And how did it sounds like it was a little bit, and I ran into the same exact things. Like as I started growing myself, I ran into walls where it's like, oh my God, to
Yeah.
keep growing, I have to dissolve some belief or I have to renegotiate things with people around me. But I know this is a little bit of a complex question, but first of all, what led you to, how did you see the potential? How did you even see a fork or another? A lot of people would be like, what is personal growth journey? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
I didn't know
Right.
what that meant before. So how did you first start seeing that path? Let's start there.
I would say it started with boredom. It was when I was age 23 to 25, I was working as a retail manager at SM. And I was at this point in my life where I felt like I've already achieved my dream because in the past I wanted to become a manager. And okay, now I've achieved this dream. But lo and behold, when I was in that stage, I felt like this is not the kind of life that I want. It was so boring for me. So I would stay at chat time and would stay there for 2 hours, just scrolling around Facebook. And just like 6 months in, I felt like so freaking tired. I was like, I'm just so tired of this life. I know this was what I was dreaming about, but what's in it for me? That was really the question. And then I stumbled upon Toastmasters, right, on Facebook. And I was like, why don't I give this a try? I already tried like at least giving a speech when I was in college, and I feel like this might be a good opportunity for me to kill that boredom because I was just so bored in my life and I just don't know what else to do. And so that was when I started hanging out with people, with growth oriented individuals. And until I joined this network marketing company in the Philippines, and it introduced me to a lot of mentors in the personal growth, and just hearing from Tony Robbins and for all the mentors in the world, I felt like that was it. That was the solution to my boredom. Toastmasters, being surrounded with great and growth oriented people, and just soaking in all the lessons that I've had with the mentors, I felt like that was the solution. So I would
Nice.
say it really started with that.
Okay. So and I can relate with a lot of this, and I'm sure a lot of people listening
Yeah.
would feel the same, like feeling kind of stuck and
Yeah.
directionless, realizing that the goals you were chasing, once you achieve them, you're like, oh, this doesn't
What's
actually make me
next?
happy. Okay. And then
Correct. Yeah.
got lucky enough to come across Toastmasters, which is an amazing
Yeah.
place to grow. If anybody hasn't heard of it, I would recommend it very much. It's a great place to meet other people where you can learn. And actually, someday I want to create a company that does Toastmasters better than Toastmasters. But anyway, it's really a good place to practice, and that's how I met you. That's when I met you. And I also have a background in network marketing. I did that for 4 years, and it also was a big part of getting introduced to Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, a lot
Yeah.
of ideas that really got me started on that journey. So very similar. But
Mhm.
then it sounds like that kind of led you to realizing like, okay, there's this path where I started investing in myself and it feels really good. Tell me if I'm putting the wrong words in your mouth, but that's not what my family wants or something. Like there's some
Disconnect.
tension between the two paths.
Yeah.
So if that's correct, then I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that felt and how you dealt with it.
Yeah, that's correct. I actually felt euphoric when I first heard of Jim Rohn on YouTube because I felt like I was waiting for this moment for so long. I feel like I was in a quest to find something, but I don't know what. So when I stumbled upon personal growth and listening to Jim Rohn, I was like, this is what I was looking for years. And how come no one introduced me to this area in life? Because, and then I could say that there was a huge disconnect with my family and how I was trying to grow up because my family was not in the growth space. And I knew that even with simple things like, oh, you can, like, it's okay to be fat or it's okay to be chubby or whatever. Like we are like this, we are okay with the situation. Like, just not striving to be better every day is a huge disconnect that I had with my parents. And I knew that if I stayed at our house for years further while pursuing growth, I know I'm going to be stuck. I know that I'm going to be limited. And that was the reason why I moved out from my parents' house and eventually stopped supporting them because I had to choose myself. This was the path that I really wanted to pursue, a path that I was actually waiting for so long that I didn't know that I was actually what I was looking for. Right? I don't, you get what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I know
that
that feeling.
feeling. Yeah.
I'm a little bit curious. I'm quite curious if I don't know if I'll ever know the answer, but are we all hardwired to want progress? My hypothesis is that yes, we are. I think all humans
Yeah.
want to grow. We don't like
Yeah.
being stuck. I don't
Agree.
think, does anyone like
Yeah.
being stuck?
No.
But
Hopefully not. Yeah.
it's not the norm. Very few people are born in families where like personal growth is one of the big values. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
this
Correct.
family is
Yeah.
all about growing, right? So most of us,
Uh-huh.
if we discover that we have the potential to take ownership of our own growth and learning forever, that's going to put us on a path that actually creates, at least in the beginning, perceived separation from our family because that's not the norm for them, right?
Yeah.
That's not what
Correct.
but that's not their fault. That's just because it isn't the norm on the planet yet. But I mean, that's why we started Emerge, because I really want to
Yeah.
help more people. I want to like spread. And I think we're living in a period of time where we're so lucky that we have access to Jim Rohn, to this
Yeah.
conversation. So like we can learn from each other all the time, right? And
Right.
the message I want to share with people is just like every single person who has access to the internet, social media, like we can choose where to put our attention and that we can start being exposed to ideas that will change who we are. And we can actually lift ourselves we can have any life we want if we become the person that we need to be to have that life. And then what's that going to do for your family, right? Good things. It's going to be so good for your family. So it's awesome to see people like you who have made that choice. And I know it's not easy. What were some of the hardest parts about it? When were some, like, let's get down to some memories of, do you have memories of aunties calling you and guilting you for going a different path, or like any of those really challenging times?
Well, you actually guessed it, but not an auntie, but an uncle. Right? I have this uncle, and he's a pastor. As I mentioned previously, we are all like a really Christian family. And I'm not sure if I believe that right now, but yes, we started there. And I started creating my new life. And this uncle, for some reason, is always trying to meddle and to get in the way and trying to guilt me and trying to tell me like, oh, you're not supporting your parents. Oh, like, what is this new business that you're pursuing? And, that was also the time that we started creating summits. And I started to build a life with friends. And for them, being a rigid Christian family, that you can never live with a man unless you are married. And that was like a huge struggle in our relationship, because that was a time when I feel guilty, when I feel ashamed, like, why am I pursuing a life of growth and a life with the love of my life, and feeling happy about it, but at the same time not feeling happy because of what my family and my uncle and the rest of the relatives have been trying to, stop me from doing. And I feel like there's a lot of disconnect with how the Christian families are being brought up and how they expect the rest of the community would behave. And I felt like that was a huge struggle that I had to overcome. But later on, they they just really accepted who I am and what my decisions were. And luckily, they respected me. But it was a really hard and difficult process as I've gone through that.
I've gone through something super similar, and it's fascinating when you start to notice the feelings of shame that are in
Yeah,
you, guilt and shame. And it's like, where's this coming from?
you're right.
I didn't create this. Like, I'm making choices I'm proud of. I'm
Yeah,
making choices. I know why I'm making these choices, and I'm pretty confident they're good for me. I have all this evidence to say like it's good for me what I'm doing, and then I'm still feeling really bad about it. But it's also
yeah,
very fascinating how humans, like, we grow up in these models, whether it's religion or culture or whatever, where it's been told, we've been given a very prescriptive kind of box that we're supposed to live in, that everybody knows, this is what's good, this is what's not good. And people, when they see somebody going outside of it, it kind of scares them or freaks them out, because it's like, oh, you're either leaving us or
yeah,
you're judging us as wrong. And it threatens the validity of the way they're choosing to live, kind of subconsciously puts it into question. It's like, oh, maybe our choices, but they don't want to think
yeah.
that. So it's like, no, we're right. We're right. We're right. And then it gets kind of pushed on you, but then you just stay true to trying to learn, trying to live better. And then eventually people just let go of all that and they just accept you again.
You're
And
right.
then they start to respect you. They have no choice, because look at who you are. Like, look at who you're turning yourself into. Eventually they kind of drop all that judgment and just realize like, wow, they're never going to come back and say, you're right, we're wrong. And it's not about any of that,
Yeah,
right? It's not about being right
correct.
or wrong, but eventually I've noticed usually the judgment goes away with that.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing those stories. I know those are kind of vulnerable stories to share.
Yeah.
Where did you go from? I don't know, what other stories would you like to, or what else would you like to go deeper on, or other stories we haven't talked about that you think would be useful for people, if you have
I
any
think
in mind?
yeah, I think what's very important that I want to encourage everyone is to take a journey of self awareness, because sometimes situations really change if you just know yourself better. Say, if you know your triggers, you know your traumas, gives you a different perspective or a different view of things. And in the past years of me being a leader, I feel like the more that I become self aware, the more that I become effective in my personal and professional life. And that is my journey right now, from personal growth, still with personal growth, but now I'm digging deeper into personal and self awareness, because I feel like that's what everybody needs. And so, yeah.
Couldn't agree more with that. And I remember when I first started focusing on that skill, or just that goal, I remember the first couple of years of trying to increase self awareness. It was maybe in my mid 30s, actually. And it felt like I was a drone looking at myself. I'd never done this before.
Zooming out.
I'm like, I'm observing myself, how
Yeah,
the hell was I going through life all that time without doing that? I can't even imagine that now, but
correct.
I know it
Yeah.
was true because I remember when I started, which means there's a lot of other people living on the planet right now. They're just kind of unconscious, like not
Yeah.
noticing what's going on in ourselves. But the more it's been, I guess, almost 15 years now of working on that. And every single day, there's more layers, there's more
Yeah.
nuance, there's more to notice. I think it's a never ending journey, probably, of trying to understand ourselves better. But how, for somebody who either doesn't know what the heck self awareness really even means by feeling, like doesn't really get it yet, or maybe they already know they want to be more self aware, but what have been some of the really powerful, how have you been exercising it? What have you discovered? How could you guide someone on a journey of becoming more self aware? If you could give some tips.
I would start with what I'm doing right now with becoming more self aware, and that is with meditation. I feel like when you start tuning in to yourself and to just get to know your thoughts and get to know yourself, that is when you start to identify which things are actually working on you or not. As a leader, what I notice is that this is my own self awareness process. It's whenever I feel like I'm irked or I feel like I'm triggered by something, I go deeper with myself. What is the reason why I'm feeling triggered? What is the reason why I am feeling annoyed by this interaction when in reality it's not about them, it's about me? How can I potentially turn this into something that I would not have to resort to that kind of feeling in the future? Like how can I process emotion? So it's really more about you having an onion and peeling like those onion like
Layers.
whatever the skin is,
Yeah.
yes, the onion layers, and just having that very wonderful baseline you, because
Yeah.
I truly believe that all of us are really amazing individuals. We just have to like take out those layers from those onions that are covering us.
Yeah.
And this might not be verbatim, but there was this one sculpture that was mentioned in the book of Marianne Williamson, and he was trying to build this sculpture. It was Michelangelo, I don't
It
remember,
was
but
it,
yeah,
it was Michelangelo when he
it
was
was
asked.
Michelangelo word,
Yeah, he
right?
said, like, how did you carve the David? He said, I just removed everything that wasn't David.
Yeah,
Right?
correct. That's
I
it.
love that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that was correct. Yeah,
So you feel like,
yeah.
yeah, I think those two metaphors are so interesting, and I've really played around with them a lot and thought about it. And I've
Mhm.
used them both before because I love them.
Mhm.
And for me, yeah, just echoing what you're saying, learning about the self, like learning about ourselves is very much like kind of like an onion in these layers. And the layers seem to be infinite. It's like the more you learn about yourself, the more there is to learn. And it's fun, like it's exciting. And you just don't even realize how much
Yeah,
complexity there is and how much potential there is to just enjoy life, just learning about yourself. And it's hard, but it's fun. And I think through learning about ourselves, we're learning about how other people work. And it's the best way to learn how people work because we're one of them. And then the whole world is kind of a construct of, because of humans working the way they do, we've created this world. And so the more you understand about yourself, therefore you understand about how other people work. Therefore, you start to innately just kind of get it when it comes to like the world gets less confusing because it's really just incredible how much you can learn about yourself.
yeah. And
Yeah.
just by peeling like those onions, those layers of onions, you would cry, right? In real life, you would cry. And then that's correct. Like you would go through pain
It's
and you
true.
would have to realize that growth can occur even in harshest environments. Even in situations that you're feeling pain, you're suffering, or etc. There is growth there. There is lesson that you can get out from that. So be a peeled onion.
Also, crying is not a bad thing.
Yeah, it is not. Yeah.
What's up with Filipinos? And I mean, you don't really need to answer this, but like after I came here and I was here for a while, I started noticing that I would sometimes have conversations with people. I could see that their strong emotions are being evoked from the conversation and they're choking back crying. And sometimes you'd see a tear and then people always apologize for it. I'm like, why are you apologizing for crying? It's a human thing. Like we need that emotion to flow. But how about that? Do you have any experience?
Well,
Have you
I
looked?
honestly was that kind of person. I would always hold back tears. And I think that was really from this thinking that you are strong and you do not need to cry or something. But over the years, I realized that it's okay to cry. Like it's good to feel those emotions. It's good to let it out sometimes. And you actually need to cry from time to time because that would make you more human.
Yeah.
And I think it's really more like the culture or the programming that, as a kid, you're not allowed to cry or whatever. So I
Right.
could not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that when we discover that there's something programmed in us that came from culture, came from religion, whatever it
Yeah.
is, and just looking at it and saying, does this serve me? And it doesn't matter how it got there. It's like, it's not about blaming the culture. It's not about saying
Yeah.
this culture is good or bad. It's just about like, hey, where did that come from? Does it
Yeah.
serve me? And I would say, crying, there's a lot of value in it. Like you show
Yeah.
vulnerability, you connect with people. The wiring is something like, well, don't burden other people with your problems, but that's just not actually
Yeah.
how it
Correct.
works. That probably came from way before we understood very well how people work, but we actually super need to connect emotionally with other people. And the person that you're crying in front of, they also need to know that it's safe to cry in front of you. Like it's way better if we just drop all that fear of these are narratives that don't help us. And yeah, the
Yeah.
being able to cry, like energy flows, it's really good for us. And anyway, sort of a random side thing, but yeah, I appreciate that. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think for the sake of this first one, maybe we can do it again in the future. I'd love to keep in
Sure.
touch
Yeah.
occasionally, but as we wrap up, you mentioned Jim Rohn earlier, and I love that guy so much. I would love to just
Yeah.
ask you, like, what are some things you loved about, why do you like him? And if you were going to recommend him to somebody, how would you introduce him to someone?
I think one of the biggest things that I've learned from Jim Rohn is the idea that you are the average of the 5 people that you hang out with. That was really important for me because that was like a pivotal period where I told myself that I need to select my friends. I need to be conscious with who I was engaging with and who I was surrounding myself with, because whoever I was with could potentially elevate my life or not, right? So I think that was one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
And also one more thing from Jim Rohn is that don't wish that it becomes better.
Easy.
Wish that you
Don't
are
wish it
better.
was
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah,
Wish you were
correct.
better.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't wish it was easier, not verbatim, but yeah, wish you were better. Because as long as you try to get better, you also kind of like gravitate towards better and best things, right? As long as you grow. According to Tony Robbins, happiness equals progress. Progress equals happiness. When you try to grow yourself, you
Yeah.
also try to like exude this different happiness within you, because you know you're keeping on growing yourself and progressing. And yeah, those
Agree.
are the things. Yeah.
And I'm just going to inject my own belief there to add a layer to Tony Robbins. I agree and believe progress is a major component of happiness. If we're growing and progressing, we're going to be feeling good. And I want to
Yeah.
ask you a question about that in just a second. I want to add in that I think a lot of the things we have to do along the way are scary. It's scary to join Toastmasters. It's scary to not go along with what your uncle's guilting you to do.
Mhm.
And it's scary to take ownership of your own learning and to take ownership of your own self. But leaning into these scary things like you have is how we get the progress. And on the other side of the scary choice is where you get that euphoric feeling of growth. And
Yeah.
that's where the happiness comes from. So
You're
I
right.
just want to tell you, I'm really proud of who you're making yourself into. And just think it's amazing that you've made a lot of scary, courageous choices to do those things that have led to the growth. So thank you for who you're making yourself into. And I know that you're going to be, I believe that you're probably already a teacher. You just don't call yourself that yet. It's like people are learning. I'm sure people are learning from you all the time. All right. So just
Right.
to wrap up, 2 questions. We've already talked about Jim Rohn, but I would
Yeah.
love to ask, like, for anyone out there that wants to learn from you, or kind of either they're on a personal growth journey or they want to get onto one, what's like one resource that you would recommend that's been really good for you? Anything you want to share?
Well, I would like to say that personal growth differs in every stages. Sometimes you gravitate towards resources that, would be applicable to your life now and is very relevant. And there are times that, you would have to also change and try new things. Right now, I am exploring spirituality and I like Marianne Williamson a lot. And one of the things that she mentioned in her book was this statement that everything we do is either an act of love or a cry for help. And that's really it. And if there's a relationship thing or a relationship podcast that I would like everyone to listen to, is the Relationship Theory by Lisa Bilyeu and Tom Bilyeu. This was a really good source for you to identify the power of communication in a relationship, giving 100%, taking 100% ownership in
Responsibility.
everything. Yeah, correct. And really realizing that whoever you choose as a partner is an integral part of your growth. And I am very lucky that I have a growth oriented partner. And I know it's tough for everyone to find someone who is in a growth oriented position as well. But know that as long as you try to grow yourself first and then attract this person, I think that has to stop from you working on yourself first and then attract and gravitate towards the same kind of person in the future.
That's a whole nother hour of conversation. I think we have to flag that topic as something that you and I need to
Part.
we need to, create more content on later,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot to talk about there. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for those recommendations. And I love what you said. And I think those are, I haven't followed Marianne Williamson. I'm going to check her out. All right. So last question. What's something that Nizley today, actually, there were 3 questions and I skipped over one of them. So I'll go to the first one. Anyway, so if you think of yourself 5 years ago compared to how you see yourself now, what are some of the big differences? What are some things about you that, are just very different from 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Tough question.
How have you grown? What about yourself do you like that's better? Let's say, what's improved?
I think what improved significantly is my confidence.
Yeah.
Way back, I was not a confident person. I was a kind of woman who would just be the background. I would not even place myself in situations that I feel awkward. I would not be even in this interview. But I learned that confidence is just like a muscle. You can build it. You can go to the gym, build muscles, and that is how confidence is. As long as you start, you try to build yourself up, you try to put yourself in very awkward situations and be okay with it. And to really get that mindset, and it's okay to suck at the beginning, as long as you kind of keep on progressing. I think that is what really I'm most proud of. That if for the past years I've been insecure, I've held myself in the lower standards, and I felt like that has really changed because of my personal growth journey. So to anyone
Totally.
who wants to become more confident in the future, I beg you to start growing yourself, because that is also where the muscles of confidence would come from.
The image behind me came from Midjourney, and the words I put into Midjourney were doing my best to give it a prompt to describe. If anyone doesn't know what Midjourney is, it's AI to create art. And I did it 5 minutes before this call. The thing that I was imagining, that I was trying to describe, was how I've seen you go from when I first met you in Toastmasters, and you were, like many of us need to do. And I think what you were just trying to describe is, like, at first you have to put on this mask of confidence.
Yeah.
Until
Yeah.
you really know who you really are. And then you're like, and then you sit in this comfortable confidence where it's like, okay, now I don't have to pretend anymore because I know who I am. And I'm like, it's genuine.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main things I've watched in your growth of confidence. Like, you started out almost like it felt cocky because you're putting on this professional, but now it's
Yeah.
like, now it's real. Love it. I don't know which side of the butterfly represents which future or path. I'll let you decide. All right. Last question. What's something you're still struggling with or working on? I think you kind of touched on this already, maybe. Could be a few things you mentioned, but yeah, just something you're focusing on. You said already self-awareness and spirituality, but either something else or just a little bit more resolution on either of those. Like, what's something you're really working on improving right now or learning?
I am still struggling with reconciling with my past, because I am working on integrating my shadows and, getting the juices and the secrets, and how to leverage from these shadows. And I feel like there are things in my past, childhood, teenage life, that I have buried so deep in my subconscious that are currently limiting me. I'm not even conscious about them right now, but I try to do a shadow work through the prompts of this author. It was Debbie Ford. She was a very close friend of Marianne Williamson. And I feel like when I start, unpeeling and uncovering those traumas, those previous childhood experiences that I've had that are currently, I am unconscious of, that are limiting me, that is when I would come out, I would be able to shed a different light and eventually elevate my life and become a butterfly, like a legit butterfly. because sometimes I feel like there are things that I might not be conscious of that are currently stopping me from my growth. And until I uncover them and until
Okay.
I put them consciously into my mind, that's when I would realize that,
Yeah.
hey, we need to place some different light into this situation. We need to place some color in this dull, dark, gray smoke in the previous life, right? We need to do something to eventually grow myself and to become the person that I'm meant to be. And that is what I'm currently struggling, reconciling with my past.
Nice.
Still a
Beautiful.
work in progress.
If I can just share my perspective on that, if you are okay with it, the universe, because you are leaning into that and you're open to it and you want it, like the universe is going to send you the opportunities to discover it and you'll figure it out.
Thank
And
you. Yeah.
also, it's just keep reinventing yourself. And it's a never ending journey of reinvention and a new butterfly and a new butterfly and a new butterfly. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know for sure that all of the past traumas or things that I needed to discover have been discovered. I have no idea. Probably going to be, probably going to be stuff that shocks me, but it really is incredibly powerful when those things do appear and you're like, oh, that's why I've been so afraid of this.
Yeah. Correct.
And then you
Yeah.
just understand and then it kind of starts to go away and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And if I can just add a little bit to that, I always have this feeling that I don't like people who are breaking their promises. Right. And when I made this shadow work with Debbie Ford, I realized that, when I was younger, I was probably in the second grade. I was promised by my parents that they're going to buy me a specific bag that I absolutely love. However, they broke their promise. Even though I became first honor in that class, they broke their promise and they did not buy me a bag. And so right now, I feel like my nation to not liking people who are not, staying true to their words is actually rooted way back when I was
Yeah.
in the second grade.
Yeah.
And just, realizing
Yeah.
that those events happen and, just putting a different light to it. Like
Putting a different
probably
light.
my parents had a
Exactly.
different situation. They had to like pay something else that was more important for the family. And that's it. And now I could place a different light and why I actually am triggered with people not saying truth in their words. So it could give you some light, but I would agree that not all traumatic events could have some meaning in the future. I don't know. I've not done a lot of work yet, but I'm still that's a work in progress for me.
I think it seemed just to kind of simplify what typically happens. I think from what I can understand, when we're kids, especially if there's something we don't understand that happens, and then we create a story. So you didn't understand
Yeah.
why they made a promise and then didn't keep it,
Right.
or why they said they would do something. And then in your mind, it's like they didn't, and then it hurts. And especially because you don't
Correct.
understand it. But the reality is like almost seems to me pretty much anything that ever happens to us, it's never the thing that happens. It's the story we create because
Correct. Yeah.
because we didn't understand everything. If we could understand everything, we'd be like, oh, well, that's why it happened. And it wouldn't hurt, So I love this.
Right.
I'll leave you and anyone listening with this question that has helped me so much. And I don't use it every single time something happens in my life that I don't like, but every time I do use it, oh my God, it helps so much. What is it about this behavior that I don't respect that I'm seeing? So I'm seeing somebody's doing something, I don't like it, or somebody did something or didn't do something and I didn't like it. What is it about this behavior I don't respect that I don't yet understand? And like when you start to get curious about that, you can start to fill in the blanks and guess like, oh, maybe it's because they didn't eat breakfast this morning or, whatever it is. And it's not making excuses for people, but when you start to focus on the understanding, once the understanding appears, and like you said, shedding a new light on it, the bad feelings usually start to dissipate. But anyway, many other topics we could go deep on. I've very much enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
And thank you so much for being here and for your support with getting Emerge started. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Eli. It was really fun. It was really a really good conversation.
Agree. Talk soon. See you.
Thank you so much for listening to this interview on Emerge Stories. We really hope that something here sparked your curiosity or maybe helped you think about something in your life just from a little bit of a different angle or perspective, maybe opened up your mind to something you might be able to do in your life to take more ownership of your own learning and growth. That's the goal of this show. So please join our community, like and share, and tell other people about these stories if they're meaningful for you. And thanks so much for being here.